So what can you expect to learn in this video? I thought it was about time that I actually did a direct comparison between Pastelmat and Canson paper, so you're going to see how it reacts and works with Pastel Pencils, PanPastels, Pastel Sticks. I'm going to keep it nice, short and sweet again. I know lots of you don't have much time, so I'm going to get straight to the facts on each of those. Right, so let's start off with something we know about. Pastelmat Dark Grey. That texture feels roughly the same as the Canson Velvet. Pastelmat Light Blue feels a little bit finer. So let's try and keep it all kind of the same. So what I'm going to do first of all, let me show you the texture. I'm trying to think of ways to show you differences and similarities. So if I'm just using the pencil on the side, okay, that's what the texture appears to be. Because how am I going to tell you online? You can't feel it. So if I put Canson Velvet right near it, let's push that up a little bit now so you can just about see this as well, right? So if I'm holding that, doing exactly the same, trying to show you the similarities of the actual surface texture. I know the colours are a bit different, but that doesn't matter. So just by applying that on its side, I'm deliberately not trying to push it down into the paper surface. Let me get that right to the edge, okay? Now stay with me. It's all going to be valuable info for you. So you can see that's really very, very similar to that texture. So let's keep those there. The wonder of magnets. And let's use Pastelmat Light Blue. This has been my favourite now for a while. So you can see this has got slightly less texture. Not by much, but it's definitely a slightly less texture than the dark grey Pastelmat. So if I bring that one right to the edge as well. Okay, I know it's lighter, so it's making it look even less textured. But there's a direct comparison. If I use my finger to blend, you can see as per normal with Pastelmat, it holds it in place. Okay, now the Canson Velvet may be holding it in place a little bit more. Now, when I'm doing initial layers, you know, I usually use a stump on these compressed papers. And let's put, let me see, just a little bit more pastel here on the end and push a bit harder so you can see it a bit better. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but there's actually horizontal lines in there. Now, I haven't picked this paper deliberately, but that's a fault in Pastelmat. That's one of the things I'm trying to get away from. You can't see these faults to start with, and then you start putting pastel down on the surface, and then all of a sudden things like lines become apparent. That's not bad, but compared to how it can be. So if I use it on the side, very, very little pressure. Let's bring the light over a little bit, and you can see it blends down in, gets rid of a lot of that grainy appearance. I'll use the clean side of this just so we can see in comparison. You see it does very, very similar. Obviously papers, as I've said, different colours. One thing I've noticed with this Canson Velvet, it lies flat and is less prone to warping of the paper than the Pastelmat. And the reason for that is Pastelmat on its back, I'll show you, it's got quite a rigid card, white card. The Canson Velvet on its back, because the paper is roughly the same size, looks the same, but it's more floppy. It's more of a floppy, less rigid card. And the fact that it's less rigid means we don't get that kind of warping that you can get with Pastelmat paper. So that's how pencils work on there. And then obviously we could go on top with details just the same as we would with, just checking that's on the screen, Pastelmat. Okay, so it works very, very similar. As far as will it then blend, very, very similar. Again, you see they really hold. Now, of course, when you put layer upon layer upon layer, then it would blend on the top. But let's not overcomplicate things. Let's move on now to PanPastels. Now all I'm going to do is use a PanPastel, one of the soft tools, one of the pans, dip it in. I get plenty of pastel on there, just so we can see again for a comparison. Is it on screen? Yes. And what I do is small circular strokes. If you've seen any of my videos, you see how this is how I almost always apply PanPastels. Now it's grabbing the surface, okay? The soft tools, the sponge is grabbing onto this surface. That's what we expect with Pastelmat. Remember, it's not like printer paper. So if I had printer paper in comparison, it would just, you know, slip and slide across the surface. We don't want that with the pastel papers. We want it to be able to grab, or at least I do, so that I can put it in places like that and it holds. What about PanPastels? Pastelmat, how does it compare? What I would say, it possibly grabs the PanPastel a little bit less than this new paper. So it's probably a bit easier to put PanPastels on this than the Canson VELVET, but it's not much in it. This does, in fact, yes, it does grab it a bit more, but you see as you put more on, it builds up just the same. The differences you see in there in the PanPastel colour is really due to the papers. Now what about the light blue? And if I pop that there as well, I'll show you. Yeah, these papers are almost identical. Almost identical. I'd say the Canson VELVET is holding on a little bit more. What about a darker colour? Let's try a brown, because we do a lot with browns with wildlife subjects. This is quite a powdery pan that I'm using. It's gone a bit dusty looking. But there we are. Pastelmat. I don't know if it's picking up, but can you see those lines in there again? Now that's one of those issues I get with PanPastels, because once it's in there, you can do your whole drawing, you come back, perhaps you're doing the background, and all of a sudden you've got these lines in there, and to try and get rid of them, you may have to go different directions, and sometimes no matter what you do, it's in there. As I said, this is not a very bad example. It can be a lot worse than that. Not that I'm trying to pick holes in Pastelmat, but they really need to up their game, especially now we've got a new kid on the block. So once again, Canson VELVET, almost identical in application. It is grabbing the PanPastels a little bit more. So let's look at some pastel sticks. This is a Rembrandt, I would have thought. So middle of the range, is one of the harder sticks, if anything. So we put a fair amount of that down. Let's get this down in the same line. I'm using same pressure. Obviously, as I mentioned, all the way through the paper is different colour, so things show up a bit differently. Let's get the light over a bit more. Blending. Wipe my finger. In fact, use a different finger. Got plenty. Once again, I'd say this Canson VELVET paper is holding on to the pastel even more. I like that. I like that ability, because I can always put more pastel down on the surface if I want to get an even smoother blend, or to blend it out more. You see, they're so similar. In fact, if I shut my eyes, I honestly don't know if I could really tell the difference between the two. So, coloured pencil artists, forgive me for what I'm about to do. I know nothing about coloured pencils, and no doubt I'll be applying them wrong. But Wanted to show you the surface and how it could possibly work with coloured pencils. So this is Polychromos Faber-Castell. I know it's a popular brand. So let's look at the Pastelmat Grey. And all I'm doing really is showing you the texture, because I know nothing about how you guys blend and things and apply it even. See those lines now? Now they're coming in the Pastelmat. It's really quite apparent. Let's get a piece of the Canson VELVET. Using the pencil on the side. So you can see very, very similar texture to the dark grey paper. Now if I looked at the light grey paper of Pastelmat, it's got less texture than the dark grey. So I'm trying to show you how this new paper compares. Now if I'm actually going in, I'm not using much pressure at all here. Okay, very little pressure, probably the same pressure you'd use when you're generally writing. So I wanted to show if this makes any sense to you coloured pencil artists out there when you're building up your layers. I'm not pushing hard at all. I'm hoping this paper will be suitable for you guys as well. You're going to have to decide, or wait for Bonnie. She'll do a good review of it, I'm sure, in-depth review. Don't forget, let me know if there's any papers you want tested out there. I didn't know this paper even existed. It's not been out long until one of my Patreon Art Club members. We've got a very active community over there, and she came across this, Maxine is her name, and she did a wonderful drawing, and I was immediately, my interest was immediately piqued, and I grabbed hold of some paper, and the rest, as they say, is history. So that's how it layered with coloured pencils. I'm not a coloured pencil artist at all. Okay, so hopefully that's helped you coloured pencil artists out there. So what did you all think about that? I'm really excited about this paper. It compares very much with Pastelmat. The two pads I've got so far of the Canson VELVET, each individual sheet is absolutely perfect quality. That surface is really perfection. I couldn't ask for anything better. So I'm excited to use it. I hope you're excited too. I put that a little bit in there about coloured pencils. I'm going to be very interested to see what you coloured pencil artists out there make of this paper as well. But for pastels, I think it's going to be perfect, at least for my technique. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, I think you're going to love this one too.